You know what's a good distraction from your miserable life? Books are. What kind of books, you ask? Well, books about humanity sentencing itself to 10,000 years of a slow death and suffering. Today, we're going to be discussing the Horus Heresy series of books from the Black Library. No, not all of them, Christ, no. Just the first three. If you don't know what the Horus Heresy is, it's basically the events that set the stage for modern Warhammer 40k, a science fiction universe set in the 42nd millennia, where humanity rules most of the galaxy under the Imperium of Man, and it's ruled by the godlike creature known as the Emperor of Mankind. And life sucks pretty hard. The Imperium is besieged by uncountable horrors, orcs, space elves, edgy space elves, weeaboos who are in fact not communists, you moron. The Tau, Jesus, these people bug me. The Tau live in a strict classist hierarchy that Marx would be extremely opposed of. I'm sorry, I'll move on. Space bugs who want to eat you, robot skeletons, and the malevolent gods of their warp and their demonic legions. On top of that, the Imperium is basically a theological, authoritarian state with an oppressive religious government, and even on the more progressive worlds, you could have your whole world destroyed just because some loser on a different hemisphere wanks off to some weird shit. But how did this all come to be? Well, that's basically the story that the Horus Heresy books try to tell. It covers the later years of the Great Crusade, the Emperor's quest to reunite all of the human worlds, which are scattered across the stars in the 31st millennia. Alongside him are his 18 sons, demigod-like beings, each of which are in charge of a legion of superhuman warriors called Astartes, or Space Marines. And then the series covers the war that breaks out following the Emperor's favorite son, Horus Lupercal, after he betrays the Emperor. The first three books in the main series are Horus Rising, False Gods, and Galaxy in Flames. Now, there are books that take place before and in between those three, but these are the ones that came out first, and you won't really be missing any major plot points if you haven't read them in chronological order, and just go by the order they were released, at least with these first three. I'm going to try to stay away from spoilers if I can, but these books are written with the assumption that you already know a little bit about the 40k universe, and they lean heavily on dramatic irony. The first book, Horus Rising, follows Gabriel Loken, who is the 10th captain of the Luna Wolves Legion, which is led by the Primarch Horus Lupercal. The book follows him through the last years of the Great Crusade, and we see the events that would sow the seeds that would see Horus fall to the corrupting powers of chaos. The book also sees Loken change in his perception of his part in the Great Crusade, and we see him growing dissatisfied with the state of his legion. This book mainly serves to build up the characters, both human and Astartes, especially that of Horus himself. We see that Horus is a smart and caring father to his sons. We see him take pride in their victories, as well as comfort them in their losses. At the end of this book, the author does a really good job of making sure that you like Horus as a character. The action scenes are well written, and they demonstrate the sheer might and unstoppable nature of the Astartes, making them into the intimidating super soldiers that they are supposed to be. This unstoppable nature that's established early in the book is tested when the main characters fight to exterminate a dangerous alien population, making the threat that these aliens pose seem even greater. The book also introduces some other characters that will become important later in the series, such as Saul Tarvitz and Lucius and Lord Commander Eidolon, all from the Emperor's Children Legion. They also briefly introduce Rogaldorn and Sigismund of the Imperial Fist Legion. There's also a cast of human characters that I don't really like in this first book. They have a purpose in the plot that I won't spoil, but it seems like most pages with them take away from the dramatic scenes we get with the Space Marines and the Primarchs. They do become more important and less annoying throughout the first three books, but it seems like in the first one they just kind of slow everything down. Some other complaints I have with this first book is that the first few chapters are kind of difficult to follow. mostly because the book kind of starts with a weird twist. This is a spoiler warning. If you don't want to hear spoilers for the book, um, go to the timestamp that not timestamp, fuck me, the time code signature thing that I'm going to include on the screen right now. But the first few chapters follow Loken as he's telling us a story about how they are attacking a planet called Terra. But it's not holy Terra, it's not Earth. And it's also ruled by somebody who calls themselves the Emperor of Man, but it's not the Emperor of Man. It's just kind of confusing. Top that with, they introduce a bunch of these characters, and they all have fucking like weird names. Like Loken is a weird name. Torgadon, which I'm still sure that I'm not pronouncing correctly. They're all just weird names, and it's kind of difficult to get into when you have this weird name and this weird kind of twist. The book does get a lot easier as it goes along, but it seems like with a lot of the Horus Heresy books, the first few chapters are kind of difficult to get into because of just how weird everybody's name is. It's kind of hard to follow characters whose names you can't even pronounce. And some of them are worse, some of the books are worse at that, and some of them are better. But for this one especially, it's very difficult the first like 30 pages. The second book, False Gods, follows the same cast of characters several months after the events of the first book. Another major character who plays a big part in this book is Erebus, who is the first chaplain of the Word-Bearers Legion. The book doesn't really explain why he is there. It is explained, it's just explained in the first Heretic, which is a few books down the line. But Erebus was introduced in the first book, but he plays a much greater role in this one. Most of this book is plot and actively moves the series along, and we see Horus start to embrace chaos by the end of the book. I've mentioned chaos a few times now. If you don't know what that is, chaos in the Warhammer world it's kind of difficult to explain. There are these 4 evil gods that live in the warp, which is the opposite of the material world where emotions are made manifest. And there are 4 of these evil gods. Khorne, the god of bloodshed and murder. Nurgle, the god of disease, rot, and decay. Tzeentch is the god of change and scheming. And Slaanesh is the god of pleasure. Basically, what you have to know about them is they are evil, they have a very corrupting influence, and they are massively afraid of the Emperor of Mankind. There are some problems with this book, as the plot is kind of silly sometimes, and we get some more dumb human characters. Spoiler warning again, go to this time code if you don't want to hear spoilers. During the book, Horus gets word that a planet that they brought into the Imperium has rebelled against them, and Horus orders that the Lunar Wolves should go and put them down. During the battle on the surface of the planet's moon, the Lunar Wolves find that the moon has been transformed into like a thick swamp, and they are attacked by what is basically zombies. And you would think that like these superhuman space marines should have no trouble cutting down even lots of zombies, but they kind of struggle, and it kind of takes you out of the facade that they are these unstoppable beings, but that's just kind of a minor issue. Horus confronts the old governor of the system that rebelled, and he finds that he's become this monstrous creature wielding a strange sword. Horus is injured by the sword, which Erebus stole from some people in the last book, and somehow managed to give to this governor that corrupted him with the power of chaos. Somehow in between the first 2 books. They might explain that, but I kind of forget if they do right now. So Horus gets injured, and they bring him up to the ship. But the apothecaries on the ship can't heal him because they don't know how. In the book they explain it as like, oh, he's a Primarch, he's a son of the Emperor, we don't have the information necessary to know how to heal him. Which seems weird. He's like one of the most important people of the galaxy, you should probably know how to heal him. But whatever. So Erebus and some other space marines take Horus down to the surface of Davin, which is the planet that they're trying to reconquer. And they do this like heathen ritual to heal him. So just kind of a quick insert, I forgot to put this on the script. The reason this is important is because as they are conquering human worlds and bringing them into the fold of the Imperium, they are also spreading the Imperial truth, which basically says humanity is wonderful, there are no gods, and superstition is bad, and we have to kill all the mean aliens. So the fact that they are doing this like heathen pagan ritual to heal Horus makes Loken and a lot of the other space marines extremely uncomfortable, and they don't like that. Additionally, during this ritual, Erebus is going to Horus via visions and telling him that the Emperor is going to betray him and forget him, and that he's basically abandoned him to continue his work and doesn't care about him. And he's telling Horus that he should betray the Emperor and take over the universe for himself. During this vision, these illusions that Horus is having in his like comatose state, his brother, Magnus the Red, also appears to him. And he says basically the opposite. He says, don't listen to this worm, the Emperor loves you, he bestowed upon you this great honor, you cannot betray the Imperium. And for some reason, Horus doesn't listen. It could be explained better. But Horus doesn't listen to Magnus, and he rises from this ritual, and he's a changed person. So basically, during the whole ritual thing, Loken and Torgadon, whose name I'm sure I'm not pronouncing correctly, kind of figure out that Erebus is fucking with them. They try to confront Erebus and confront the other members of the Mournful, which is like the council to Horus Lupercal, so it's Loken, Torgadon, Horus Aximad, or Little Horus, and Ezekiel Abaddon. Loken goes to them and he says, look, Erebus is fucking with us and manipulating us, and they basically tell him off. And we really start to see the deterioration in trust between Loken and his fellow Astartes, and that's kind of another big point of this book. And that's just kind of a very bare bones explanation of some of the plot points. There are some weird plot holes and conveniences, along with more human characters that kind of bother me, but the story goes pretty fast, and so much cool stuff is going on that the plot doesn't really linger on the dumb human characters and the plot holes and conveniences for very long. I finished this book in like 8 hours, so it goes pretty fast. And I enjoyed that it wasn't super slow like some of the other Horus Heresy novels are. And the book ends with Horus proclaiming that they're going to go put down a rebellion on a planet called Istvan III, along with the World Eaters, Emperor's Children, and Death Guard legions. And that brings us to Book 3, which is pretty great in my opinion. It's called Galaxy in Flames, and it describes the events of the betrayal of Istvan III and sets up Book 4. Galaxy in Flames shows up the complete deterioration of Loken's relationship with his legion, as well as finally making the human characters interesting, mostly because there are less of them and they actually help advance the plot. This book also follows some of the Emperor's children that we met in the first book, and it kind of shows us their attitudes towards their legion, and it's just kind of interesting because the legions are so personalized, they have so much character, that every time you get to see another one of them and see their rituals and see how they behave, it's just fascinating, and it's very well written. I'm going to do some explaining, so this is... The thing is, you probably should know how this book ends. The book is written with the expectation that you know how it ends, which is kind of a positive and a negative. If you know how it ends, the dramatic irony and the foreshadowing is really interesting and clever. If you don't know how it ends, it's not very subtle, and you're going to be very disappointed. So, massive spoiler warning for Galaxy in Flames. If you don't want spoilers, go to the time code. So Horus and the other Primarchs, Mortarion, Angron, and Fulgrim, hand-pick troops to assault the capital of Istvan III. Basically, what they're doing is they're only sending the Astartes that they believe will not turn against the Emperor. During the invasion, the fleet bombs the planet and attempts to kill all of the loyalist elements, purging the Legion of any undesirable members, basically. Luckily, the Loyalists catch wind of this and they take cover, and what ensues is a ground battle between the surviving Loyalist Astartes and Angron with the traitor World Eaters. Basically, Angron just got bored and decided to go to the surface and start killing things against Horus's order, and that's a very Angron thing to do, but it kind of does... It fits in his character, and it allows for the rest of the book to happen. So it's kind of like a convenience and something that wouldn't really make sense, but, you know, it's fine, I guess. It's not like super... It doesn't really take you out of the book that much. Meanwhile, the human characters escape with Captain Iketon Cruz. Iketon? How do you say that name? This is the problem with some of these names. I feel like that should be really easy to pronounce, but it isn't, and I'm having a problem, so I'm going to call him Cruz. They escape with Captain Cruz to the ship called the Eisenstein, and it basically sets up Book 4. The book ends with the Loyalists being defeated after being sold out by Lucius, who just wants to spite Saul Tarvitz, and their relationship is very interesting. I'm not a huge fan of Lucius's character. It's very clear that he's just Lucius the Eternal, and, like, if you know modern 40k, you should know what that is. But if you don't, he's just this super Emperor's Children Astartes who's just really good at killing things, and he's a complete arrogant asshole, and that's just his character. It's really not very deep or subtle, and he kind of annoys me, but whatever. It also shows us the apparent deaths of Loken and Torgadon. Overall, I really like this book. I like the deterioration of trust between Loken and his Legion, as well as the other Astartes who come to realize that they've been betrayed. I enjoy the scenes with Horus and how we see how his mindset has completely changed as he feels cast aside and betrayed by the Emperor. I think the action scenes are written really well and give you a great sense of how desperate the Loyalists are as they're stuck on Istvan III. Just as a general wrap-up of these books, they have some excellent dramatic scenes and do a great job of bringing these larger-than-life characters to a human level so you can relate to them. The world building is pretty great, but it can leave some readers who don't know about modern 40k out of the loop on some aspects. Sometimes the pacing of the book is thrown off by the human characters, which is unfortunate. It's rarely a meaningless division, but the meaning doesn't really come until later, and at that point you're just like, why couldn't this have been done in a more interesting way that doesn't completely halt the book in some scenarios? The books aren't super long. Each of these first 3 is under 500 pages, and they hook you into wanting to learn more about the universe and read the rest of the series. Navigating the series can be a little bit difficult. You can just go by publication date, or you can go by like chronological order that they're supposed to take place in, which is what I did. If you go by publication date, you might be forced to read, I guess not forced, you can do what you want, but some books will be in there that you might not care about or ruin the pacing of the whole series. Like, for example, I don't care about the Mechanicum, I don't care about the stupid Mars people, so I skipped Mechanicum. If you think I'm wrong for doing that, you can shut up. I skipped all of the Dark Angels ones because I don't care about your medieval fantasy. I just want to get to dramatic Primarch scenes. And so that's kind of an issue if you just want to read it publication date. It's kind of difficult to find a good chronological timeline of all the books. There's a bunch up on Reddit, but they're kind of hard to follow. And there's a lot of short stories in between that kind of add some context to some other stories, characters, or plot points that are good. And you have to get a lot of books that you might think you'll be confused, but you probably shouldn't be if you want to just do chronological. It flows pretty well if you just want to do chronological, especially because the first 3 books fit up pretty well. I guess you can read Thousand Suns and Prospero Burns in between False Gods and Galaxy in Flames, but it's not super important that you do that if you want to do chronological. But overall, I think these books are really great, especially if you're already into 40k. I've read up to Fulgrim so far, which I think is book 5, but I'm reading them in chronological order, not order published. So I've read 11 of the total. I think it's 9 novels. I've read 9 of the novels, 2 of the anthologies, and 5 of the Primarch novellas, which I want to talk about too, because those are really interesting, and I'm planning on finishing the whole series at some point. These book reviews may become a staple on the channel. I will definitely keep talking about the Horus Heresy series, fuck me. And the Idea Guide video is coming out very soon. Please subscribe and follow me on Twitter, and leave in the comments on whether you think Hell is just the Piccadilly map TDM where everyone's using the M4. Thanks, and bye.